The stars looked cold and distant through the windows of the UE's Discovery as it moved slowly through space. Commander Jake Martinez sat in his captain's chair, watching the empty void ahead. His ship was small compared to the huge military vessels back home, but it was perfect for exploration missions like this one. "Commander, we're getting close to the target area," said Lisa Chun from the pilot's seat. She was young but skilled, one of the best pilots in the human fleet. Her hands moved quickly over the controls as she adjusted their course. Jake nodded and looked around the bridge. His crew was small but good. Bobby Wright, their engineer, was checking the ship's systems from his station. The man never seemed to worry about anything, always calm even when things went wrong. Dr. Amanda Ross, their scientist, was studying her instruments with intense focus. She had joined their mission to study alien technology and life forms. "What exactly are we looking for out here?" Bobby asked, not looking up from his controls. "Intelligence says there might be an old alien station in this area," Jake replied. "Something from the Valix Empire. If we can find it, we might learn more about them." Everyone on the ship knew about the Valix. They were the rulers of most of the galaxy, an ancient race that had controlled space for thousands of years. Humans had only recently started exploring beyond their own solar system, and they had heard many stories about the powerful aliens. "There," Dr. Ross said suddenly, pointing at her screen. "I'm detecting something large about 2 million kilometers ahead. It's not moving, and it's not sending any signals." Jake felt his heart beat faster. "Take us closer, Lisa, but be careful. We don't know if it's still active." The Discovery moved forward through the darkness. As they got closer, the object became clearer on their screens. It was huge, much larger than any human station. The design was strange and beautiful, with curved walls and towers that seemed to twist in impossible ways. "It looks abandoned," Bobby said, studying the readings. "No power signatures, no life signs. Whatever it was, it's been dead for a long time." Jake made his decision. "Prepare the shuttle. Amanda, Bobby, you're with me. Lisa, keep the ship ready, in case we need to leave quickly." The shuttle ride to the alien station was quiet. Jake could see his crew was nervous, and he felt the same way. This was their first time actually touching something built by the Valix. As they got closer, the station looked even more impressive. It was the size of a small city, floating silently in space. They found a docking port that seemed designed for smaller ships. Bobby managed to connect their shuttle to it, and soon they were walking through the station's corridors. The walls were made of some kind of metal that seemed to glow softly, even though the station had no power. "The air is breathable," Amanda said, checking her instruments. "The atmosphere is still sealed inside." These Valix really knew how to build things. They walked deeper into the station, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. Everything was much larger than human size, built for beings that were taller and stronger than people. Strange symbols covered the walls, and the rooms they passed were filled with equipment they didn't understand. "Look at this," Amanda called out from a large room filled with screens and controls. "This looks like some kind of research center." Jake and Bobby joined her. The room was huge, with dozens of workstations and storage units. Even without power, some of the screens still showed faint images and text in the alien language. Amanda pulled out a portable translator device and connected it to one of the still working terminals. The machine hummed as it worked to understand the alien text. After several minutes, words started appearing on the translator's screen. "Research log, day 15,847 of the project," Amanda read aloud. "The experiments continue. We have tested 47 different species so far, but none show the properties we seek. The Council grows impatient, but we must find the final catalyst." "Final? Catalyst for what?" Bobby asked. Amanda continued reading. The old prophecy speaks of a young race that will bring endings to the endless. We must find this race before they find us. Our immortality depends on it. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Keep reading. Subject 2-3A shows promise. Their neural patterns create unusual distortions in our quantum fields. However, exposure to their presence for extended periods causes ... discomfort. We must study this further. The three humans looked at each other. The implications were frightening. Amanda accessed more files. There are thousands of research reports here. The Valix have been studying different alien races for centuries, looking for something. And they seem afraid of something called the young race. Could they mean us? Bobby asked quietly, before. Anyone could answer. Alarms started blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing everything in red light. That's impossible, Jake said. This station was dead when we arrived. Amanda was frantically checking her instruments. Something's activated the station's emergency systems. And I'm detecting ships approaching fast. Multiple ships. They ran back toward their shuttle, but the station's corridors had changed. Doors were sealing themselves, and new passages were opening. The station was coming back to life around them. This way, Bobby shouted, leading them down a side corridor that seemed to lead toward the docking area. As they ran, Jake couldn't stop thinking about what they had read. The Valix were afraid of a young race. They were studying different species, looking for something they called a catalyst. And their immortality somehow depended on not finding this mysterious race. What if the young race they feared was humanity itself? What if humans were the ending that the endless Valix were so afraid to face? The shuttle came into view ahead of them, but Jake knew their troubles were just beginning. Whatever they had discovered in this ancient station, it was going to change. Everything between humans and the supposedly immortal rulers of the galaxy. 6 months had passed since Jake Martinez and his crew escaped from the ancient Valix station. The information they brought back had changed everything for humanity. The government was now preparing for something they had never faced before. First contact with the galaxy's most powerful empire. Captain Danny Foster stood on the bridge of the UES horizon, watching the massive space station called New Geneva grow larger on his screen. This was humanity's most important diplomatic station, built specially for meetings with alien races. Today, it would host the most important meeting in human history. Captain, the Valix ships are approaching, reported his communications officer. 3 vessels, much larger than anything we've ever seen. Danny nodded calmly, but inside he felt nervous. He had been chosen to represent humanity because of his experience with alien cultures. But the Valix were different from any other race. Humans had met. They were older, more powerful, and according to the research from the abandoned station, they might see humans as a threat. Admiral Kevin Stone joined Danny on the bridge. The older man looked tired but determined. Remember, Foster, we're not here to start a war, but we're also not here to surrender. Humanity has rights, and we'll defend them. Understood, sir, Danny replied. In the station's diplomatic section, Helen Parker was making final preparations. She was humanity's best diplomat, someone who had helped make peace between different human colonies. Now she faced her greatest challenge. The meeting room had been designed to accommodate different alien species, with adjustable gravity and atmosphere controls. Dr. Amanda Ross was also there, along with several other scientists. After her experience on the Valix station, she had become an expert on their technology and culture. She was studying her instruments, trying to understand what they might face. The Valix ships are docking now, announced a station officer. They're requesting permission to bring their full diplomatic party aboard. Granted, Admiral Stone replied, but maintain security protocols. We don't know what they're capable of. The first Valix to enter the station was Ambassador Kix Thara. She was tall, nearly 8 feet, with pale blue skin and silver hair that seemed to move on its own. Her eyes were completely black, and when she spoke, her voice had a musical quality that was both beautiful and disturbing. "Greetings, young species," she said, looking around the room as if she was examining insects. "I am Kixthara, speaking for the Eternal Empire. We have come to discuss your future in our galaxy." Danny stepped forward. "Welcome to New Geneva. Station, Ambassador. I'm Captain Danny Foster, representing the United Earth Systems. We're honored by your visit." Kixthara seemed amused by his formal words. "Honor? You speak of honor when you have invaded our territory? Your ships have been found in areas that belong to the Empire. This cannot continue." Helen Parker joined the conversation. "With respect, Ambassador, we weren't aware that those areas were claimed by your Empire. We've been exploring space that appeared to be empty." "All space belongs to the Empire," Kixthara replied. "We have ruled this galaxy for 50,000 years. Every star, every planet, every asteroid belongs to us. Your species exists only because we allow it." The humans in the room exchanged glances. The Valix ambassador was clearly not interested. In negotiation, she was here to make demands. "What exactly do you want from us?" Admiral Stone asked directly. Kixthara smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. "Simple. Your species will surrender 12 of your colony worlds to us. We require them for research purposes. In return, we will allow your remaining worlds to exist under our protection." "Research purposes?" Dr. Ross asked. "What kind of research?" "That is not your concern, young one," Kixthara replied. But as she spoke, Amanda noticed something strange. The Valix ambassador seemed to be breathing harder than before, and her pale skin looked even paler. "We cannot agree to surrender our colonies," Danny said firmly. "Those worlds are home to millions of our people." "Then perhaps you need time to consider," Kixthara said. "But know this, we have destroyed entire species for less defiance than you show now. We are immortal, eternal. We have seen civilizations rise and fall like waves on a shore. Your species is nothing special." As the hours passed, the negotiations continued. The Valix made increasingly harsh demands, while the humans tried to find common ground. But Amanda Ross was paying attention to something else. She was watching Ambassador Kixthara with her scientific instruments, and what she saw was impossible. The Valix ambassador was changing. Her skin was becoming more pale, almost gray. Her movements were becoming slower, more tired. When she thought no one was looking, she would touch her face as if checking for something. "Are you feeling well, Ambassador?" Amanda asked during a break in the talks. Kixthara's black eyes fixed on her with anger. "I am immortal, young scientist. I do not become unwell." But Amanda could see the truth in her readings. Something was happening to the Valix ambassador, something that was making her weaker. And it seemed to be getting worse the longer she stayed near the humans. The negotiations continued for hours. The Valix wanted humanity to surrender, to become part of their empire like every other species. The humans refused, insisting on their right to independence. As the talks went on, Kixthara became more and more agitated. "You do not understand what you are refusing," she said, her voice becoming harsh. "We offer you a place in the eternal order. We offer you protection from the dangers of the galaxy. Why do you resist what every other species has accepted?" "Because we're not every other species," Helen Parker replied. "We believe in freedom, in the right to choose our own path." "Freedom?" Kixthara laughed, but the sound was weak. "Freedom is an illusion. There is only order and chaos. We represent order. Without us, this galaxy would fall into darkness." By the end of the day, it was clear that no agreement could be reached. Kixthara stood up, swaying slightly on her feet You have 30 days to reconsider. Surrender the 12 worlds we have demanded, or face the consequences. The Empire has been patient with lesser species before, but our patience has limits. As the Valix delegation prepared to leave, Ambassador Kixthara stopped at the door. You puzzle me, humans. In all our years of rule, no species has ever affected us as you do. Perhaps that is why you must be dealt with quickly. After the Valix left, the human delegation gathered to discuss what had happened. But Dr. Ross had a different concern. Did anyone else notice how the ambassador changed during the meeting? She asked. She became weaker, more tired, and my instruments detected strange energy patterns whenever she was close to us. Admiral. Stone frowned. What are you suggesting, Doctor? I'm not sure yet, Amanda replied, but I think we need to study this more. There might be something about humans that affects the Valix in ways we don't understand. As the Valix ships departed from New Geneva Station, heading back to their empire, none of the humans knew that they had just witnessed the first crack in 50,000 years of immortal rule. Ambassador Kixthara sat in her ship, staring at her hands and wondering why she felt so strange, so mortal. The 30 days passed quickly, and humanity's answer was clear. They would not surrender their colonies to the Valix Empire. Admiral Stone had expected this response to lead to war, but he had not expected the war to be so strange. The first attack came at New Terra, one of humanity's largest colony worlds. Colonel Sam Rodriguez was commanding the ground forces when the Valix ships appeared in the sky. He watched from his command post as alien soldiers dropped from their ships in small landing craft. All units, prepare for contact, Sam spoke into his radio. Remember, we don't know much about their weapons or tactics. Stay alert and work together. The Valix soldiers were impressive when they first landed. They were tall and strong, wearing armor that seemed to shine with its own light. Their weapons fired beams of energy that could cut through steel. They moved with confidence, as if they had done this thousands of times before. Lieutenant Maria Gonzalez led the first human squad to engage the aliens. She was young but brave, the kind of soldier who never backed down from a fight. Her team took cover behind the ruins of a building and opened fire. Contact, contact. Maria shouted into her radio. We're engaging Valix ground forces at grid reference 77 Alpha. The battle was fierce at first. The Valix seemed unstoppable, their weapons cutting through human defenses. But as the fighting continued, Maria noticed something odd. The alien soldiers were slowing down. Rodriguez, are you seeing this? She called to her colonel. The Valix troops are moving slower than when they started. Sam was watching the same thing from his command post. Through his binoculars, he could see Valix soldiers stumbling, some of them falling to their knees. It was as if they were getting tired very quickly. The battle lasted for 6 hours. By the end, something impossible had happened. The mighty Valix soldiers were retreating, but not because they were losing the fight. They were retreating because they were dying. Colonel, you need to see this, Maria called over the radio. She was standing over a fallen Valix soldier, her weapon still ready. This one is still alive, but he looks old. Sam rushed to her position. What he saw made no sense. The Valix soldier who had looked young and strong when he landed now appeared ancient. His skin was wrinkled, his hair had turned white, and his eyes were dim. He was breathing weakly, like a very old man. How is this possible? Sam whispered. They're supposed to be immortal. Back on Earth, Dr. Amanda Ross was working frantically in her laboratory. She had been studying the data from the Valix station and the diplomatic meeting for months. The reports from New Terra gave her the final pieces of the puzzle. Tim, Carol, come look at this, she called to her research team. Tim Walsh was a physicist who specialized in quantum mechanics, And Carol Evans was an engineer who understood alien technology better than anyone. "I think I know what's happening to the Valix," Amanda said, pointing to her computer screen. "Look at these readings from the battle on New Terra." The screen showed energy patterns that seemed to dance and shift. "These are quantum signatures," Amanda explained. "Every living thing has one, but humans have something special. Our brainwaves create a unique pattern that exists in multiple dimensions at the same time." Tim studied the data. "Are you saying that human consciousness somehow affects the Valix?" "More than that," Amanda replied. "I think human consciousness is toxic to whatever makes the Valix immortal. When they're near us for too long, especially in stressful situations, they start to age rapidly." Carol was looking at the biological samples they had collected. "This is incredible. Look at these cells from the Valix soldier. They are breaking down at the cellular level, but not from disease or injury. It's like they're being forced back into normal time." Meanwhile, in the Valix Empire, Overlord Zethkar was receiving reports that made no sense. His forces were dying in battle, not from human weapons, but from something far worse. They were experiencing time itself. "Explain this to me again," he demanded of his military commander. "Our soldiers are aging to death in combat?" "Yes, my lord," the commander replied nervously. "After several hours of fighting humans, our troops begin to show signs of rapid aging. Their immortality simply stops working." Zethkar had ruled for thousands of years. He had seen species rise and fall, had watched the birth and death of stars. But he had never seen anything like this. His immortal soldiers were becoming mortal in the presence of a young species that had barely left their home world. "Summon the historians," he ordered. "I want to know everything about the old prophecies. Find me the meaning of the young race. It brings endings to the endless." Back in human space, more battles were being fought. Captain Jenny Sullivan was leading a boarding party onto a Valix command ship. Her team included Marines who had volunteered for the most dangerous mission of the war. "Remember, we're not just here to fight," Jenny told her team as they prepared to board the enemy ship. "We need to capture their command center and learn more about their technology." The boarding was successful, but what they found inside the ship was disturbing. The Valix crew was in various stages of aging. Some looked middle-aged, others looked ancient. The ship's commander, who should have been immortal, looked like he was dying of old age. "What have you done to us?" The dying commander asked Jenny in broken English. "We were eternal. We were beyond time. How are you making us mortal?" Jenny didn't know how to answer. She didn't understand it herself, but she could see the fear in the alien's eyes. For the first time in 50,000 years, the Valix were experiencing something they had forgotten. The fear of death. Dr. Ross was working around the clock to understand the phenomenon. Her research showed that the effect was strongest when humans were experiencing strong emotions, courage, determination, hope, and especially the willingness to sacrifice for others. "It's not just our presence," she explained to Admiral Stone during a video conference. "It's our humanity itself. When we're being most human, when we're fighting for our freedom, protecting our families, standing up for what's right, that's when the effect is strongest." The war was changing rapidly. The Valix, who had expected an easy victory over a primitive species, found themselves facing an enemy that could kill them simply by being near them. Their ancient empire, built on the foundation of immortality, was crumbling. But the Valix were not defeated yet. They were ancient and cunning, and they had resources that humanity could barely imagine. As reports reached Overlord Zethkar about the true nature of the human threat, he began to make plans that would shake the very foundations of the galaxy. The humans had shown the Valix that they were not truly immortal. Now the Valix would show the humans what 50,000 years of accumulated power could do when faced with extinction. The war was about to become something much bigger than anyone had imagined. The war had been going badly for the Valix Empire. Their fleets were retreating from human space, and their soldiers were dying in ways they had never experienced before. Overlord Zethkar stood in his throne room, looking older than he had in thousands of years. For the first time since becoming immortal, he could feel time touching him. His advisors were arguing among themselves, some wanting to continue the war, others suggesting they pull back and find another way to deal with the humans. But Zethkar knew the truth that none of them wanted to admit. If they continued fighting humans directly, the Valix Empire would die. Enough, he said, his voice cutting through the arguments. Summon Elder Historian Mixandra. It is time to speak the truth that we have hidden for 50,000 years. Meanwhile, on Earth, Professor Eric Turner was working with Lieutenant Colonel Paul Martinez, Jake's brother, to understand more about the human effect on the Valix. They had been studying captured Valix technology and biology samples for weeks. Quantum patterns are unlike anything we've seen, Eric explained to Paul as they reviewed their research. It's as if the Valix exist partially outside normal space and time, but human consciousness somehow pulls them back into regular reality. Paul looked at the data on the screen. So when they're near us, they become mortal again. It's more complex than that, Eric replied. I think their immortality isn't natural. It's being maintained by something else, and humans interfere with that connection. Before Paul could respond, an urgent message came through on the communication system. Admiral Stone's face appeared on the screen, looking tired but excited. Professor Turner, Colonel Martinez, we've received an unprecedented communication from the Valix. They want to meet for negotiations, but not with our military leaders. They're specifically asking for our scientists and historians. They say they have information that will change everything we know about this war. The meeting was arranged on a neutral space station, controlled by an independent alien species called the Zephyrians. The humans sent a small delegation, including Professor Turner, Dr. Ross, and Colonel Martinez. The Valix sent Elder Historian Mixandra, one of their oldest and most respected leaders. Mixandra was different from other Valix they had met. She looked ancient even by their standards, with silver skin and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of countless years. When she spoke, her voice was filled with sadness. Young humans, she began, you have done something that no species has accomplished. In 50 millennia, you have forced us to confront the truth about ourselves. Dr. Ross leaned forward. What truth? Mixandra was quiet for a long moment, as if deciding whether to continue. We were not always immortal. Long ago, we were much like you, mortal. Beings who lived, loved, died, and found meaning in our brief existence. But we were afraid of death, afraid of ending. When beings from higher dimensions offered us eternal life, we accepted without understanding the price. Professor Turner felt his heart racing. What was the price? We became hosts, Mixandra said, her voice barely above a whisper. Parasites from dimensions beyond normal space needed vessels to exist in our reality. They offered us immortality, in exchange for our bodies, our world, our very essence. We became the means by which they could feed on life itself. The humans looked at each other in shock. Colonel Martinez was the first to speak. Feed on life? What do you mean? Every species we conquered, every world we claimed, every civilization we destroyed, their life energy was harvested by the entities that live within us. For 50,000 years, we have been nothing more than farmers, collecting life force to feed creatures we cannot even see. Dr. Ross was studying her instruments. That would explain the quantum signatures we've been detecting. You're not just immortal. You're being kept alive by beings that exist partially outside our dimension. Yes, Mixandra nodded. And you're Species threatens that arrangement. Human consciousness exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. You are naturally resistant to the parasites, and your presence disrupts their ability to maintain our immortality. Professor Turner was putting the pieces together. So when we're near you, the parasites can't function properly, and you begin to age normally. More than that, Mixandra replied. Your emotional states, your courage, your hope, your willingness to sacrifice for others, these create quantum disturbances that are toxic to the entities. The stronger your humanity, the more dangerous you are to them. The revelation changed everything. The humans realized they weren't just fighting an empire, they were fighting against cosmic parasites that had been feeding on the galaxy for millennia. Why are you telling us this? Colonel Martinez asked. Mixandra looked even sadder. Because some of us remember what it was like to truly live. We have watched our people become hollow shells, existing only to serve creatures that care nothing. For us, your species has shown us that mortality can be fought with courage rather than surrendered to fear. Back on the Valix homeworld, Overlord Zethkar was feeling the weight of his choice. The entities that had granted immortality to his people were becoming angry. They could sense the threat that humanity represented, and they were demanding action. Strange voices whispered in his mind, voices that had guided the Valix for 50,000 years. They spoke of destroying not just humanity, but entire star systems if necessary. They would rather rule over a dead galaxy than lose their source of food. But Zethkar was changing. The proximity to human consciousness during the war had awakened. Something in him that had been sleeping for millennia, doubt. For the first time in thousands of years, he was questioning whether immortality was worth the price they had paid. On the neutral station, Mixandra continued her revelation. The entities are becoming desperate. They know that if humanity continues to spread through the galaxy, their feeding ground will be destroyed. They are planning something terrible. What kind of terrible? Dr. Ross asked. Total war. They will possess our people completely, turning them into creatures that exist only to destroy. They will sacrifice the entire Valix race, if necessary, to eliminate the human threat. Professor Turner felt a chill. Can they do that? They have kept us alive for 50 millennia, Mixandra replied. They can certainly kill us if they choose. But there might be another way. She leaned forward, her ancient eyes filled with something the humans hadn't expected to see: hope. The connection between our people and the entities can be broken, but it requires a massive quantum disruption. It would need to be coordinated across our entire empire simultaneously. The entities would fight back, but if successful, it would free not just the Valix, but every species they have enslaved through us. Colonel Martinez understood the implications. You're talking about liberation for the entire galaxy. Yes, Mixandra said, but it would require cooperation between our species. Humans would need to work alongside Valix, who are willing to give up immortality for the chance to truly live again. The meeting ended with an agreement to present this information to both governments. As the delegations prepared to return to their respective homes, Dr. Ross had one final question. If we do this, if we break the connection, what happens to your people? Mixandra smiled for the first time during their meeting. We die, eventually. But for the first time in 50,000 years, we also get to live. The war was about to become something entirely different. Not a conflict between species, but a battle for the freedom of an entire galaxy from parasites that had fed on life itself for millennia. The plan was simple in theory, but almost impossible to execute. Admiral Stone stood in the command center of the largest human fleet ever assembled, watching as ships from both species prepared for the most important battle in galactic history. Beside him, Overlord Zethkar looked older and more fragile than any Valix had appeared in 50,000 years. Are your people ready for this? Stone asked the aging alien leader. Zethkar nodded slowly. those who chose freedom over eternal. Slavery, yes, but many of our kind still serve the entities willingly. They will fight us as hard as they fight you. Captain Jake Martinez commanded the lead human vessel, the UES Liberation. His brother Paul was with him, along with Dr. Ross and her team of scientists. They had spent months preparing the quantum disruption devices that would hopefully sever the connection between the Valix and their parasitic masters. All ships report ready, Jake announced over the fleet communications. Human and Valix vessels are in position around the target system. The Valix homeworld hung in space before them, a massive planet surrounded by ancient space stations and defensive platforms. But this was not an invasion. It was a rescue mission for an entire species. Elder historian Nick Sandra was aboard one of the Valix ships that had joined the Liberation fleet. She looked even older now, her body finally showing the weight of millennia, but her eyes were bright with determination. The Nexus is deep beneath our world's surface, she explained to the Joint Command staff. It has been there since we first made our bargain with the entities. To destroy it, we must get a team to the planet's core. Colonel Sam Rodriguez would lead the ground mission. His team included both human Marines and Velix rebels who had chosen mortality over servitude. Among them was the former Ambassador Kixthara, who now looked like a middle-aged Valix instead of the ageless being she had once been. I know the way to the Nexus, Kixthara told Sam as they prepared for the mission. I have walked those tunnels for centuries, never understanding what I was really serving. As the fleets moved into position, the entities began to respond. The loyal Valix ships that remained under parasitic control started changing. Their crews were being possessed completely, transformed into creatures that were more parasite than Valix. My God, Dr. Ross whispered as she watched the enemy ships on her scanner. The life signs aboard those vessels. They're not Valix anymore. The possessed ships moved within human coordination, their weapons firing energy that seemed to tear holes in space itself. But the combined human-Valix fleet was ready. They had learned to use their greatest weapon, their humanity. Young Private Alex Cooper was aboard one of the troop transports heading for the planet's surface. He was scared, like all the young soldiers around him, but he was also determined. He had grown up hearing stories about the brave humans who first discovered the Valix weakness, and he wanted to be part of the story that freed the galaxy. The battle in space was fierce. Possessed Valix ships fought with desperate fury. Wow. The Liberation fleet used coordinated attacks that maximized human presence near enemy vessels. Wherever human crews got close to the possessed ships, the entity's control began to weaken. Captain Jenny Sullivan led a squadron of fighters in close attack runs on the enemy fleet. Her pilots were volunteers, knowing that their proximity to the possessed vessels put them in extreme danger. But they also knew that their courage and determination were weapons as powerful as any laser cannon. Target the command ship, Jenny ordered her squadron. Get in close and stay there. Our job is to disrupt their coordination. On the planet's surface, Colonel Rodriguez's team was fighting their way through ancient tunnels toward the Nexus. The possessed Valix defending the facility were no longer recognizable as the proud species they had once been. They moved like insects, coordinated by a single alien intelligence. The Nexus chamber is just ahead, Kixthara called out as they fought through another wave of defenders. But the entities will not give up their hold easily. When they finally reached the Nexus chamber, the team was amazed by what they saw. The room was enormous, filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with otherworldly light. At the center was a massive device that seemed to exist partially in multiple dimensions at once. That's it, Dr. Ross said, studying her instruments. That's the anchor point that keeps the entities connected to this dimension. But as they approached the device, the chamber filled with a sound that was not quite voice and not quite music. The entities were speaking directly to them, offering bargains, threatening destruction, promising anything if they would just leave the Nexus alone. Alex Cooper stepped forward, his young face set with determination. "No," he said simply. "We choose freedom." The battle reached its climax as Alex and several other volunteers from both species placed the quantum disruption charges around the Nexus. The entities' voices became screams of rage as they realized what was happening. "Alex, get back!" Dr. Ross shouted as the charges began to activate. "The quantum feedback will be deadly." But Alex smiled and shook his head. "Someone has to stay to make sure it works. Tell my family I helped free the galaxy." The explosion was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Light that existed in dimensions beyond normal perception filled the chamber, and waves of quantum energy spread outward from the planet at faster than light speed. Throughout the galaxy, the effect was immediate. Every Valix felt the connection to the entities break. Their immortality ended in an instant, but for the first time in 50,000 years, they also felt truly alive. The possessed Valix ships in orbit stopped moving as their crews collapsed, finally free, but dying from the sudden return of time to their bodies. The entities, cut off from their anchor point in normal space, faded back into the higher dimensions, where they belonged. In the aftermath, Admiral Stone stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his former enemies work together to rescue survivors from both fleets. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning. Overlord Zethkar, now visibly aging by the hour, approached the human admiral. "Thank you," he said simply. "For the first time in millennia, my people can die with honor." 6 months later, Jake Martinez stood in the newly established Galactic Council chambers. He was now an admiral himself, overseeing the formation of a new alliance between humans and the surviving Valix. The galaxy was learning to live without the shadow of the ancient empire. Elder historian Mixandra, though dying of old age, spent her remaining days teaching both species about the other civilizations that might still be enslaved by similar parasitic entities. Her final words became the motto of the new Galactic Liberation Force. Freedom is not given. It is chosen, and it must be chosen again every day. The story spread throughout the galaxy how humanity's gift was not strength or technology, but their refusal to trade their authentic lives for false immortality. Species that had lived in fear for millennia began to hope again. And in the depths of space, new human exploration ships carried the message of liberation to distant stars, proving that sometimes the greatest victory is not conquering your enemies, but helping them remember what it means to truly live.